The rat torture box was one of the most disturbing methods developed in both medieval Europe and parts of China. It required no complex tools, only a container, heat, and an animal desperate to escape. The setup was simple. A metal or clay box containing a rat was placed against the victim's abdomen or back. Once the box was secured, heat was applied to the outside, forcing the rat to find a way out. What made this method uniquely horrifying was that the rat's instinct for survival became the driving force of the torture. As the temperature inside the box rose, the animal panicked. With no other direction to run, it dug downward into the flesh of the restrained victim. The pain was immediate and severe, but the psychological fear was even greater. Victims knew exactly what was happening and had no way to stop it. This method was not designed to kill. Torturers monitored the process carefully, applying heat slowly to ensure that the rat worked its way into the skin without causing fatal damage. The goal was to create intense, prolonged suffering and to break a person's resolve through the combination of panic, revulsion, and helplessness. The cruelty of this method went beyond the physical injury. Knowing that a living creature was clawing and biting its way into their body pushed victims into extreme psychological distress. Many confessed or cooperated long before the rat caused serious harm. The fear of what would happen next, rather than the pain itself, was often what forced people to surrender. After the torture stopped, victims were left with deep wounds and lasting trauma. Some developed infections or permanent scarring. Others struggled for years with the memory of the experience. The method relied on blending physical agony with a primal terror that bypassed rational thinking. The Pear of Anguish was a mechanical torture device developed in parts of Renaissance Europe. Despite its simple design, it caused extreme internal pain without being intended as an execution tool. The device consisted of a metal, pear-shaped instrument with adjustable segments that expanded outward when a screw at the base was turned. The torture began by placing the device inside one of several possible openings, the mouth, the rectum, or the vagina. Each placement targeted a different kind of humiliation, and authorities often chose based on the accusation or the type of confession they wanted. Once inserted, the torturer slowly turned the screw, causing the metal petals to widen. The expansion stretched sensitive tissues far beyond their natural limits. Unlike methods that produced immediate visible injury, the pear inflicted pain from the inside. Victims could feel their muscles tearing as pressure increased, but the outside of the body often showed little damage. This hidden suffering made the device effective for interrogations, because torturers could apply intense pain while leaving few external marks. That meant victims could be punished repeatedly over time. The slow turning of the screw made every moment worse than the last, creating a rising sense of dread. People often broke mentally before the expansion reached its maximum width. Confessions were extracted quickly because the pain was sharp, intimate, and impossible to ignore. In many cases, the device wasn't expanded fully. Torturers preferred to inflict just enough damage to weaken the victim but not enough to cause fatal injuries. This allowed them to use the device multiple times. The injuries also healed slowly, creating lasting discomfort and making future sessions even more unbearable. Freezing torture was widely used in regions with harsh winters, especially during periods of Siberian exile and in certain Russian penal systems. Unlike methods that relied on sharp tools or fire, this one used nature itself as the instrument of suffering. Victims were exposed to extreme cold for long periods, often with their clothing removed or soaked in icy water to intensify the effect. The process began with forced exposure. Prisoners were taken outdoors or placed in unheated chambers during freezing temperatures. Sometimes they were tied to posts. Other times they were ordered to stand still for hours. Cold affected the body slowly but powerfully. Limbs became numb, skin stiffened, and muscles lost their ability to respond. Yet the intention was not to freeze the victim to death, the aim was to keep them alive just below the point of collapse. What made this torture extremely painful was the way cold interfered with the nervous system. As temperatures dropped, the body fought to maintain warmth by pulling blood away from the extremities. Victims experienced sharp, burning sensations as ice crystals formed beneath the skin. When the torturers periodically poured cold water over the body, it intensified the pain and restarted the cycle. The psychological impact was equally severe. Cold created a sense of confusion and helplessness. Victims struggled to think clearly as their body temperature dropped. Simple tasks became difficult. Time felt distorted. People began to panic not only because of the pain, but because they felt themselves losing control of their own body. That loss of control was one of the reasons this method was so effective for breaking resistance. Once the session ended, recovery was slow and painful. As the body rewarmed, blood returned to the frozen areas, causing intense throbbing and sometimes permanent nerve damage. Many victims suffered frostbite, losing sensitivity in their hands or feet for the rest of their lives. Even those who survived physically often carried emotional trauma, becoming unable to endure cold environments or even winter air without experiencing fear. Freezing torture proved that suffering didn't always require tools. Sometimes the environment itself became the weapon. By using cold, torturers could push victims to the edge of survival while keeping them alive long enough to submit, confess, or lose the will to resist. It remains one of the most psychologically and physically draining torment methods recorded in history. Sleep deprivation became one of the most widely used psychological torture methods across multiple civilizations. Unlike physical devices that left clear injuries, this method attacked the brain through exhaustion. It relied on preventing a person from sleeping long enough for their mental stability to collapse. The process could be carried out in several ways. Prisoners were forced to stand, kept under constant light, or exposed to irregular loud noises that interrupted every attempt to fall asleep. Some were questioned for hours without pause, while others were shaken awake the moment their eyelids closed. The goal was always the same: keep the victim conscious until their mind could no longer function normally. At first, the effects seemed mild: irritability, difficulty focusing, confusion. As the hours turned into days, those symptoms grew rapidly. Victims found it impossible to think clearly. They struggled to answer questions or remember basic information. Their emotions shifted unpredictably from anger to panic, making them more vulnerable to pressure. By the third or fourth day without proper rest, the brain began to malfunction. People experienced hallucinations, seeing things that weren't there or hearing voices that didn't exist. This stage made the victim extremely compliant because their sense of reality weakening made it difficult to resist orders or maintain their story. Many confessed simply because they could no longer process what was happening around them. The physical toll was significant as well. Muscles weakened, immune systems dropped, and victims became increasingly unsteady. Even after the torture ended, some individuals dealt with long-term sleep issues, anxiety, or sudden memory lapses. The damage wasn't always visible but remained deeply ingrained. History remembers certain nights not because they changed borders, but because they exposed how far human brutality can go when power is absolute. One of those nights unfolds during the Mongol siege of Baghdad in 1258, a moment that marks a turning point in the psychology of torture. Reports from that era describe a city collapsing piece by piece as Mongol forces advanced. The fall itself wasn't the most terrifying part, it was the deliberate mental destruction inflicted on prisoners long before any physical harm began.